welcome to Bledsoe Said So. I'm your host, Ryan Bledsoe. Joined tonight in the studio is my producer and very, very good friend, Alex. We are going to talk about a topic that is very meaningful to me tonight, something that I've been meaning to get to for years, and sort of with a lot of change that's been going on recently, we've kind of taken a look at our schedule and realized we had some time to dig into this, and it just made sense with kind of what's been going on lately. So we're going to talk about the goddess, and, you know, the focus I wanted to take there were apparitions throughout human history, because I think it's very important to be aware of such events that are genuinely occurring throughout human history. Before we get into that, I wanted to mention three things. So if you check us out at bledsoesaidso.com, that is our lovely website where we have a number of things like, for example, we have a shop. We can sell all kinds of merchandise on there and things like that are wonderful ways that you can support the show. And also there is a form on there for contacting us. Let's see. We have our Instagram, Bledsoe Said So. I would highly recommend the Instagram because that is the number one way to stay current with what we're doing, announcements, and just staying on top of like what's going on in our sphere. We're posting clips on there, but most importantly, we're posting news about what we have going on, conferences, events, things like that. And then on our Instagram are links to our personal accounts, so you can see what we're doing there. And then we have our Patreon, which is probably the best way that you could support the show. And, you know, it's not easy to ask for financial contributions, but the fact is that it gets to be a lot of time and effort and value going into what we're doing here. And the purpose behind this is to spread awareness about the spiritual reality that exists, all around us. And so something that we thought of was a way that we could create some sort of an equal value where people could support the show if they so choose. So obviously the show is free, but then we have extra content on our Patreon. We have a wonderful community on the $5 tier. It is our Mothership Discord. There's just over 700 or 800 people in there right now. It's an amazing community. We have the solo show with me called Full Disclosure, where I sort of use it as a diary to catalog my thoughts, talk about things happening with me currently, which is not typically the focus of the main show. It can sometimes be more topic heavy. And then on the $10 tier, we have monthly discounts for our merchandise, and also you get to see your name scroll in the show credits at the end of the show for our super $10 donors. So anyway, check us out at bledsoesaidso.com, Bledsoe Said So on Instagram, and patreon.com/Bledsoe Said So. So, to the topic at hand. I really wanted to dive into this because it's something that, as I'm digging my heels into my understanding of this, meaning, you know, the world, life, reality, the spiritual reality, that is, I've come to realize that the lady, as we usually call her, is the most important part of all of this. And, you know, it kind of, it's like when I see people talk about UFOs, imagine you're like just listening to people talk about such random crap that doesn't even matter. Do you know what I mean? And knowing something that is so important that people just don't even understand the significance of it. So I think there's going to be a time where people realize that the lady was the most important part of all of it, right? So I kind of wanted to focus on actual, real historical appearances beyond just our story. Let me just say this. When this first happened in 2012, the whole lady appearance thing, I didn't know that this was a concept that existed, period. I grew up very strictly fundamental Pentecostal. There's no mention of some, motherly figure other than the human Mary, virgin birth, gave birth to Jesus, and then she doesn't really talk much throughout the rest of the Bible. There's not even much mention of Mary Magdalene in the church other than she was a whore. And, that's it. That's the extent of that. Meanwhile, Catholics, by the millions and millions, are all about the mediatrix or the mediatrix or the redemptrix, as they call her, the Holy Virgin Mary, Lady of Guadalupe, Lady of Lourdes, France, Fatima, and it goes on and on and on. That's not a world that I was exposed to before this event. I had no clue about the divine feminine. It's forbidden for fundamental Christians to study anything outside of the Bible, like period. And it's so, at least in my circle that I came from, Did you ever hear about the lady or anything like that growing up?
Well, yeah, growing up Catholic, we had the Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary, and I would go to confession and I'd confess to being mean to my brother, and then I'd have to pray 5 Hail Marys, and so it was always there. And I've said it on the show before, but I really do appreciate the little bit that Catholicism includes, that the feminine force. Mm-hmm. And especially looking back and comparing what I got to experience and what you experienced, it's like, wow. There's many differences between the religions, but that's a huge one, So it was always present for me, but my Catholic school upbringing, it was more just about learning the stories and being a good little boy.
Yeah, and see, Protestants don't talk about any of that. It was kind of silly to me growing up, the notion that Mary was this holy thing. A Protestant would think that's blasphemous. You know what I mean? It's weird. Oh wait, but I thought Jesus was the Son of God. I didn't know that there was this kind of thing with me. It was my thought process growing up. It's why do they worship Mary? This is weird, But as I've gotten older, especially after my dad had this apparition appear to him in 2012, it opened a line of questioning that unfolded over a number of years for me. And where I'm at now, I'm fully into it. I think that it's the most important piece of information in all of human history. I think that the lady, the divine feminine, the mother, is the missing link between all myth systems and religions, the UFO subject, because that's a part of religions and myth systems. I think that categorically the elites who are suppressing humanity throughout all time and before even recorded civilization, I think that they have been categorically dividing us. They've been dividing us, keeping us in labels so that we, label this a certain way, label this a certain way. And then they say, you got to label it this way. And then if you say it this way, they cut your head off, or they burn you at the stake, or they peel off your flesh, or they hang you on a cross upside down and they, slit your throat and bleed you out, or whatever Emperor Nero and all of these savages did to people that questioned the official narrative. Naturally, I'm talking about the first century, when Christianity was so heavily persecuted that they had to hide underground in tombs just to, talk in secret about their beliefs, right? And I think metaphorically there's a lot of that going on today, where people have to sort of watch over their back to even talk about their beliefs. But so as I've gone on this journey, I've come to realize that the divine feminine aspect of this is the most important part. I think it's not only the most important part about religion, it's not only the most important part about UFOs, but it's the most important piece of data, period. And it quite possibly, once humanity comes to rediscover this knowledge, that it'll change our way of living and thinking. I think it is the new knowledge, right? So I wanted to start by talking about Gnosticism a little bit, because it's kind of hard to talk about the lady or the divine feminine without mentioning Gnosticism and how important it was as a movement. Talking about the fact that there was a historical version of this and a legendary version of this, right? So Gnosticism, in my opinion, shocker, I think it's the true story of Jesus. I never lost my belief or my faith in the fact that Jesus was a very special human being. But I will be honest and say that as I began to have increasing supernatural experiences, that was not met very well by the fundamental church upbringing that I had and that I come from, I, as a young child, started to ask questions. And I remember going to church, and my dad stopped going because basically it was like forbidden to talk about this stuff. They thought it was demonic. You know, we're seeing lights in the sky, supernatural beings. They thought it was evil. Meanwhile, we're at home having these angelic experiences. So, 13, 14, 15, 16, I'm scratching my head. I'm like, why are they saying this is evil? Why are they condemning this? Why are they not asking about this? Why are they not believing us when we're saying it's angels, right? I remember flipping through my Bible over and over and over, looking at the story of Ezekiel, the story of Daniel, the story of Moses in Exodus when he's bringing the Jews out of persecution from Egypt, And they have all these stories of chariots of fire and pillars of fire or a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, right? Or the chariot in the wind, or the wheel within the wheel. I'm like, these are UFOs. This is what we see, right? I just remember as a kid, like there's a connection here. There's something here. There's a connection. And as I grew older, I began to be exposed to certain things that helped me to see. It's like you're in the swimming pool and you're in the shallow end, and you're so curious about that deep end, and you're like, I want to go over there, but I'm not sure if I know how to swim. You kind of start inching over there, and it's really scary. And then your feet can't touch anymore, and you're terrified, and you feel like, oh no, I might drown if I go too far. I'm safe right here in the shallow end. It's all water anyway, so what's the difference? This is enough. But then eventually you go to the deep end and you start to float, and you realize, wow, this is pretty awesome, and I'm fine. I just got to swim. You know what I mean? And it took me many years to sort of learn that, to deconstruct my fundamental programming from religion. So I was very shocked at 18 years old in 2012 when my dad starts talking to me. He saw a lady, and she said that her name was Hathor, but that she goes by many names. And I was like, excuse me? What does that mean? I'm not saying this out loud, right? I was being a respectful young child and showing respect to my father. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And then I'm going in my room, and I'm like, oh man, I'm in deep water now. Like, I don't understand this. It was a shock to me, right? A good little Christian boy. It was a shock to me to think about the divine feminine in any regard. I never heard of it. Never heard of the New Age stuff. I had heard of the Age of Aquarius because of a song, right? I didn't know any of that stuff. Because, why do I say Age of Aquarius? Because that's, one of the many things that this apparition told my father was that the Age of Aquarius is coming, and so many things that we've covered many times on the show, right? So I'm like very shocked, what does this mean? And it took me many years to even get to the point to where in my head, I felt like I could communicate with the lady in a way that didn't, frighten me, to where I felt like, this is okay. This is completely real, and it's good, and it's natural, and it's a part of me, and it's a part of the world. It's not a new thing. You see what I'm saying? Whereas before I was like, oh, it's angelic. Cool. I'm used to that. I grew up with that. So I devoted a many number of years looking into this whole lady thing and sort of taking the time to see where it fits. And I thought that it could be really cool to talk about different apparitions as they've appeared throughout the world. So back to the Gnostic thing, right? So basically, when you think of Jesus, you think of the mainstream version. I think of the mainstream version, at least, in the sense that there is even a mainstream version and that there's a separate version, right?
And he was jacked.
Probably. He probably was jacked. I mean, I'm serious. But, or at least lean. That's a given.
Good looking.
Yeah,
sure.
Most were probably lean in first century Judea, I would say. Probably very uncommon not to be. But most people don't consider the fact that there is even an alternative version of the story, and to consider that would be heresy or blasphemy, right? I used to be in that camp. And a professor many years ago mentioned Gnosticism to me. And I was like, that's very interesting. What is that? And he just kind of explained that it was like this library of texts that was found in the desert in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, all written in Coptic, which was a language that was common around 1st century, 2nd century in Egypt, right? It's this alternative version of Jesus where he's more like a mystic, and it's like, authentically dated back to those times. It's very real sacred texts that were probably temple scrolls back in the day, and they were taken and hidden because they were so sacred and they wanted them to be preserved because they were being persecuted by the Romans. That's kind of how it was explained to me. I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. And it went on to be years before I really deeply looked into them, right? I mean, I'm talking at that point, I was probably like 18, 19, you know what I mean? So I was like, that's interesting. So that was kind of the first nudge for me to sort of like break free of my fundamental programming and think that there might be some uncharted waters here that are more in line with the truth of what's really happening. Because as a child, starting to have these experiences, I always knew that there was truth to the Bible. But again, even as a child, I had the thoughts, there has to be more to the universe than what is only in this book that was finished 2,000 years ago. Why am I not allowed to question that? Why am I not allowed to look anywhere else? Something is missing here. My intuition always told me something is missing. This doesn't feel complete. Why is that? You know what I mean? So the Gnosticism stuff was really interesting. I was like, wow, I'm very fascinated by that. And kind of a few years went by, 2 or 3. I was going through college, started dating. That took up a lot of my time, a lot of my energy, just getting that situated. You know how that goes when you get in a situation and it's all new, and then you're kind of forming a life together. And then a couple years of that go by, and then Gnosticism falls right back in my lap because it's my junior or senior year of college at Methodist University, which used to be a Bible college, by the way, back when it was called Methodist College. And then it became a university, and it was removed of the title of being a Christian institution. So like it's kind of weird. It's like they still had chapel every Wednesday, and it was a very like Christian organization, but it wasn't like officially a Christian university anymore. But it was like heavily encouraged and a part of the program somehow. So it's like, in other words, you didn't go there anymore for Bible studies. You could, but that's not why you went. They had all the other degrees, and they had a really good PA program, physician's assistant, like one of the best in the country. And that's actually why I was going to go there, because I had such a high GPA, and they gave me this huge scholarship, did 1 semester biology, got a C. I was like, I want to go to psychology now. And, a part of the program, of the whole reason I bring up the university, right, is because you had to take 2 religious courses to graduate, because it used to be a Bible college. So they kept a vestige of that, and they're like, you got to do 2 philosophy and religion courses to graduate. So I was like, okay. Everybody you talk to at the university, they're like, boo, this sucks. I hate this. It was like a huge groan, like, oh, I got to do a philosophy and a religion class. They hated it, dude. I was like, doesn't sound that bad. And I did it. Usually, so when you go to college, it's kind of like you recap a lot of the stuff in high school. And I'm saying this because you never went to college, right? So I'm telling you.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I'm being serious.
Yeah.
So you recap a lot of high school, right? So for especially the first 2 years, it's like you redo algebra, you redo pre-cal, you redo English, you redo history. You have to do that stuff. It's the stupidest scam that you have to immediately retake the courses that you took in high school. It's so stupid. And then by about the second year, especially the third year, the fourth year, you start really getting into your major, and you start taking higher level courses. So basically, towards the end of my college career, when I had gotten the generic stuff out of the way required to graduate, all the math and the bullcrap, the science, which I really enjoyed, the history and all that stuff, I got that out of the way, and I was in the last 2 years where it was like psychology, but you got to have some other credits. I'm like, oh no, what do I do? I started stacking religious courses, dude. And I was required to have 2. On my very last semester of college, the chair of the religious department was like, I've been looking at your transcript here, and I'm in a different department, by the way. I'm in psychology. These professors just kept seeing me show up over the last 3 years. Sophomore, junior, and senior year, they kept seeing me in all these common religious classes. So the chair of the department was like, can you stick around after class for a second? And I was like, yeah, sure. And we talked for a few minutes, and he was like, look, you're really good at this. You can join the honors program. I'm the head of the honors program, which is not just religion, but the whole school. A lot of colleges have honors programs, right? He's like, it's a little late in your career here, but you could still make it up if you were to work a little hard. We do abroad trips. And I was like, I'll pass. He's like, okay, well, I noticed you have 6 religious courses on your transcript. You only need 1 more, and you could actually declare religion as a minor and graduate. And I was like, heck yeah, that sounds awesome. And I ate it up, dude. And if you looked at my major in college on paper and my minor, and when you see your GPA, it's a breakdown of how you did in the math department, how you did in the science department, how you did in history, yada, yada, yada. Psychology, I had a B. My major, I had a B. And in religion, I had an A+. It was 99, 99, 99, 99 in all my classes. I loved it, dude. It was give me more of this. I wish it was my major. Point being, going through this process, I rediscovered Gnosticism and actually had to look into it at an academic level. And it was a part of one of our programs. And it was an entire 300-level religious course on early Christianity. It was really cool. And the entire semester was about studying the technical formation of the Christian movement. And I think if any reason that I went to college was significant and vital to my life, that was it, because it changed the course of my life. And I learned the truth about how the Bible was formed, the stages of, when it was made. And, maybe I don't remember all those technical details from 15 years ago or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is it started opening doors for me to understand things from a different lens and pull me in another direction. And we actually had to study things like the Marcionite movement, the Gnostic movement. Literally I had to take tests and do. So I kept thinking to myself at that time, 19, 20, 21-year-old me, I'm like, wow, this Gnostic stuff keeps coming up, right? And then I found Hermeticism, and then I started going down all these rabbit holes, and here we are, and we have Bledsoe Said So, and it's one of the most popular esoteric podcasts out there. At least that's what they tell us. That's what a lot of people tell us. I wish that were true. But, it changed the course of my life to learn about this, right? So, rant over. But I want to talk about the premise of Gnosticism as it pertains to the lady, to the goddess. I believe, first and foremost, I believe if you have a brain and you have a heart that beats, you should study Gnosticism. You should study. Why you got to study World War II? Why do you have to study Pearl Harbor? Why do you have to study anything? Why do you have to study the Civil Rights Act? Anything in history? Oh, well, because, we don't want history to repeat itself. It's an important part of the formation of our society. I mean, people could say X, Y, Z reason. Why do you study the French Revolution, the foundation of America, independence, any of that crap? But you're not required to study stuff that's arguably more important, which has universal truth that, in my opinion, potentially can, dictate where you go after here. You know what I mean? Not where you blow fireworks in the summer or whatever your holiday is and celebrate your land, or, shake hands with another nation and say, hey, we were at war 70 years ago. Let this never happen again. Those are temporary things. Those are things in physical life that, in the grand cosmic scheme of things, are so infinitesimal, small, right? But then we're talking about universal truth that could potentially impact learning in this brief glimpse of a life. Learning this important secret knowledge could impact where we go forever after this, right? So That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to make a mockery of learning other things in history. I'm saying, why are we required to study these kinds of things in our Rockefeller standard school system, but then we don't get to learn about the good stuff that's hidden from us, and that people were burned at the stake and their throats slit and their flesh peeled and they're burned alive and their heads cut off for talking about this stuff 2,000 years ago, what I'm about to talk about. An utter of this, you were crucified. You were hung upside down and you were killed, like Paul by Emperor Nero, or St. James the Greater, or XYZ apostles that were killed for talking about this stuff, not the stuff you're getting in church on Sunday. They're getting killed for the stuff that we're about to talk about. So the fundamental premise of Gnosticism is that God can be seen as the mind that is illimitable, is infinite, is boundless by any definition or label, and exists not only, like, if you consider God as above the universe, this infinitely enormous and expansive and infinite mind. I say infinite over and over again for a reason, because it is infinite, right? You could say infinite, 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 infinite. It still doesn't describe it. Your brain still doesn't understand it because it's incomprehensible. It's inconceivable. It can't even be limited to the synapses within your brain, right? This God, the one God above all gods, the true God, the secret God, is so expansive that it exists above the universe, and the universe emanates from this God, but the universe is also within this God. So that can be described as an emanation theology, right? There are multiple orders of emanation of the existence of the universe, and it all comes from the single source, which is the God above gods. It's the one true God, the one God, right? That's why people are like, are we supposed to be polytheist? Are we supposed to be monotheist? Are we supposed to be pantheist? Are we supposed to be detheist? Are we supposed to be fucking theist? Excuse my French. Talking about the French Revolution earlier. Are we supposed to be, what are we supposed to be? What is it? Well, there is one true God above all gods, and it is consciousness. It's the source of everything, right? But it's a paradox because reality exists within this God, but also emanates from this God. It's illimitable, right? So the concept is that this God is so incomprehensible and so majestic and inconceivable and undescribable that there were lesser beings, which could be imagined as like thought forms that exists in the spiritual sphere of existence, right? There are these thought forms, and they emanate from the one true God, and they are not aware of the one true God because they cannot perceive it. They cannot conceive of it. They're ignorant of it. And the idea is that this original emanation was Sophia, the lady, the divine female, Sophia. Sophia is the Greek word which means wisdom, right? So then the premise continues that from Sophia, she cannot conceive of a reality greater. So then she emanates the demiurge, which is like what we would consider the God of the Old Testament, according to Gnostic thought, right? I know a lot of people are like, whoa, that's weird. But then you can look into the Marcionite movement and see that there were entire movements of people in the 1st century, the 2nd century that were like, boo, the Old Testament and the New Testament are separate. Their heads were cut off. They're heretics. Lock them up. Burn them. So the idea is that Yahweh or Jehovah, the God of the Old Testament, is an emanation from this Sophia, and is like, if you think about like the Matrix, that would be, in the sense that like you have the movie where you see this is an illusion, it's a false world, we live here, we're kind of entrapped in it. That emanation from Sophia would be the creator of this, the Matrix we live in, the false world, the sort of prison realm, or it's like hell, or it's a nightmare. This is a Gnostic thought. I didn't create this, right? So the idea is that there was a cosmic error. There was indeed a very grave cosmic error, and these higher beings not conceiving the one true God of gods, not being aware even of its existence, and thinking that they are at the height. And that's not to say that Sophia was evil. She just she through thought she created a being, and then this being, also sometimes called Yaldabaoth, or the demiurge. These are just general Gnostic terms that people say to describe it. Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, El Shaddai, Yahweh, Jehovah, etc., Baal, which is a term which means Lord in ancient Sumer, Babylon. But the idea is that there was this cosmic error that needed to be rectified. So the one God above all gods decided to become fully manifest through the prism of human experience and came down here into earth life as a human and brought a new knowledge that rectified this cosmic error across every reality, across every dimension. Because in the story of Jesus, in his crucifixion, his resurrection, everything that occurred in his life, all of that stuff, which you can find the story of his Gospels in the canon Bible, the regular Bible, but then you can also find kind of more elaboration on what was going on with him and what he was teaching in the Gnostic books found in Nag Hammadi, Egypt. And the idea was that his life and his purpose rectified this cosmic error across all dimensions and changed the course of destiny forever, including the higher beings from other realities. So in a sense, Jesus really was like the King of Kings, the God in the flesh. In the sense that if you think of the journey of walking the spiritual path, awakening, and your psychic senses and your extrasensory perception unfolding, the more you walk along the spiritual path, focus on all of the great virtues like being kind, merciful, just, righteous, reverence for the sacred, all of those wonderful and good things. Jesus walked those to completion in human form and therefore became a vessel for the consciousness of this highest, supreme deity. Again, this is Gnostic thought. So the point is, you can't talk about the lady without talking about Gnosticism, because inherently, when you look at Catholicism and when you look at Gnosticism and even the canon story, which they still have Mary in it, and I have a ton of other examples here where there's like regular canon references to God being equated to like a mother nursing, a mother giving birth, a mother caring for her young. So we have God the Father and God the Mother. There are many different interpretations of this throughout the world across many different cultures. So enough of my rant, which I just completed at 33 minutes. I love that. It's great timing. I'm going to go into some actual like real world accounts. Do you have any thoughts about any of that before we move on?
No, you had me on the edge of my seat. I was
That's awesome.
Thoroughly enjoying that.
Awesome. So I have a really good friend who, for the time being, I'll keep his name anonymous, okay? And I don't think he would mind if he said his name, but I want to make sure that's cool first. But he's he's a wonderful, lovely human being who you'll soon become friends with and meet. And he is a Templar Knight. And he has heard our show where we talk about some of this stuff, and he has reached out to me, and we've just kind of hit it off and become friends. And he's shared some really cool information with me. And some of the information about the lady that he has shared with me opened so many doors for me. That's why at the beginning of the show, I said particularly what's been happening lately for me, I wanted to get into this topic. So it would go like sharing an article with me, and then I read it, and then it's like, oh my God, I need more. And then article after article after article, tracking all these different appearances. And I honestly thought there were only two other times in human history that the lady appeared, which was Lourdes, France, and Fatima. Now I know that is not the case. It is a lot more than that. across a lot of cultures. And lo and behold, one finds when they look at this stuff long enough that the concept of the lady or the divine feminine is actually the crux of many ancient esoteric traditions, and that it's the whole point of the whole thing. And I'm like, whoa, I is news to me. I thought it was just like a small part of it. No, it's like the whole thing. For example, the Templar Knights. It's literally the whole point is the protection. It's like you could think about the cult of the Magdalene, understanding the movement after the life and times of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. There was this whole secret order of people who, protected the sacred nature of the feminine. And they had churches, and the Templar order was a part of this. And there were other things that were a part of this. I can't remember what they were called. There was another knight order that was not the Templars, but it was a similar one. And they kind of would like cross paths a lot. But anyway, and you could call it Marianology, like the study of Marian apparitions. Like it's a very, very expansive topic looking into this. So
I just want to recap real quick because I'm just digesting what you said about Gnosticism. And so the birth of Jesus Christ the sage aligned everything in the sense that aligned this feminine power, Sophia, with the God of gods, with everything. Yeah. So that really puts a new meaning into I work for creation.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of seeing these characters become aligned with one another, right? Where it's kind of like there's a wall in between, or there's a curtain in between what's happening on earth, Sophia, and then creation or God. And then this sage gets sent on a mission, and now the curtain's lifted and everybody's working in harmony.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Now, if you understand some of the different, let me back up. There are many different ways that Jesus is described to have appeared. And I think it's important, 2,000 years later, not to get lost too much in the sauce. And just understand that some of those technical details don't matter as much. It's the message and the meaning, right? But there's so many different ways. For example, in all four of the mainstream Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, there's discrepancies in those. But Christians never say, oh, well, there's discrepancies in those, so it's all wrong. Well, no, that's not really the point. They're different accounts written by different people years apart, and they're sharing their perspective, and sometimes they're adding their flavor. Like the book of John. You ready for this surprise? It's a big one. Book of John was written by Neoplatonists, people who were followers of Plato, the Greek philosopher. Think about that. It's pretty heavy. The book of Matthew was written by Torah loyal Jews. So the book of Matthew, if you notice, has a lot more of the Gentile talk. A lot more of honoring, you know about Gentile, right? Like the idea is like back in the day, everybody who wasn't a Jew, they were a Gentile, and they're like, keep them away from me. And then in modern days, depending on which gospel you prefer or whatever scripture you read, you'd say, well, nobody's a Gentile anymore as long as you're saved in Christ. They have all these ways around making that make sense nowadays. And then I think the book of Luke was the opposite. And it was like, no, everybody's, as long as you're saved, you're not a Gentile, right? So book of Matthew was like Torah loyal. And then the book of Mark was like kind of more grounded in actual stories. And it showed a kind of more aggressive, masculine, tough side of Jesus where he's like, arguing with people, flipping over the table. And sometimes the miracles don't work. Like literally there's a story in the book of Mark where he goes to his hometown and he's like praying for people and then nothing happens and they all mock him out of town. And it's like, well, a prophet has no honor in his own town. It's a little more like story driven. It's a different flavor to all these books. Well, in some of the Gnostic scriptures, it's suggested that Jesus actually hung from a tree and that maybe he wasn't literally nailed to a cross. Some of them have more of a docetic approach, meaning he appeared in a flash of light. He didn't even have a human birth, and he was like a pure angelic being. There are some scrolls. I think it's called, God, I can't remember. It's actually something James, not the Apocryphon of James. Just read that one the other night. But the Protovangelium of James describes that at mile marker 30 between, I think it's Jerusalem and Bethlehem or whatever. I'm not a geography guy there, but I think it's between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. There's like a 30-mile marker. The Protovangelium of James describes that actually at mile marker 30, Mary, the mother of Jesus, starts going into labor. They sneak off into a cave at mile marker 30. And there was a flash of light in the cave, and out walks Jesus, and he's like 4 or 5 years old. You know what I'm saying? So there's a bunch of different accounts of his birth. I think the point is that he was divine, and we don't need to get lost in those little details. Does that sum that up? Do I have any loose ends here?
No, I think you were just trying to tell me not to make it so much about characters and...
No, that's not what I was saying. I was just saying that there's different approaches to understanding how he appeared, and that there's so many different versions of him, and people get lost too much in that. What's important is the teachings, right? The message, the fundamental nature of reality, right? But also I thought it was important to have that talk, because you can't talk to lady, you can't talk to divine. There's this weird fake movement in spirituality where people are like, I like my crystals, I like my astrology, and don't get it to like this one. Sorry, I'm backwards. I like crystals. I had kind of pigeonholed myself into a crystal joke for the first part of the show, and loved every minute of it. I'm not going to knock that stuff, but there is a weird fake spirituality where people are like, they're only into witchcraft or astrology or yoga or crystals or pretty much everything under the sun except Jesus. And they kind of, they get offended by Jesus, and they mock it, and they hate it, and they hate Christians, and they despise them. It's like, you're not being honest. You're not being honest with yourself. You're picking some things and then mocking and hating the others. You're not really spiritual. You're not really spiritual at all, actually. You're just role-playing with something that excites you and that your friends and your peers are into. Or maybe that's, you have a limited experience with the divine and the supernatural, and those are one or two things that you think are really cool and they appeal to your personality type. But you can't knock Jesus. You can't knock the importance and the sacred power of Jesus just because you don't find it cool. Like, you know what I mean?
Also here it's important to note that it's important to learn how to separate Jesus and the modern day church.
Yes, that's what I was going to say next. Like, you can't discard the whole thing and the source, and revile and hate it just because there are dumb people on earth who misunderstand it and misuse its power, right? So anyway, enough about that. I went on a very fun tangent about Jesus, but so I want to talk about actual historical appearances of the goddess. So this one I had never heard of, and actually it's the first one that I'm aware of in recorded history. It could be wrong, but this is the first one that I saw. And it happened in 40 AD, which is hilarious because Mary was actually alive. So the idea, which is not sanctioned by the church, but the idea is that Mary herself bilocated, like astral projection type spiritual technology, to another place and gave this message. Or it's an apparition. I don't know. But a lot of the speculation is that it was some sort of weird bilocation miracle, and Mary, the human, who was genuinely alive in 40 AD, did some sort of miracle. It was when St. James, I believe it was St. James the Greater, and then if you know, like the brother of Jesus, that's St. James the Lesser. They were known as the Greater and the Lesser because one of them was tall and one of them was short. Jesus' brother was short, St. James the Lesser. So this is St. James the Greater. I think he went on to be martyred. But she appeared to him on a pillar of jasper, accompanied by angels, gave him encouragement to continue his mission. He was trying to spread the gospel of Christ into other places, but was feeling very discouraged and like he wasn't achieving success with his mission. And then Mary appears to him while alive, says, continue your mission. He was in Spain, by the way, and she was in Jerusalem. She instructed him to build a church on that site in her honor, saying, "This place is to be my house, and this image and column shall be the title and altar of the temple that you shall build." The pillar on which she stood was left behind as a sign, and a small chapel was built there, considered the first Marian apparition shrine in the world. This is by the Ebro River, by the way, in Spain. Now she's the patron saint of Spain and Hispanic peoples. Her feast day, October 12th, coincides with the discovery of America as the Christopher Columbus version goes, and she was made the patroness of the New World after the first Mass was celebrated there on that day in 1942. Also very cool, you ready for this one? So James the Greater was the brother of John the Apostle, or sometimes called John the Revelator, and a son of Zebedee and Salome. The way I'm reading it looks like Salome, S-A-L-O-M-E, who was a sister of Mary. So he was actually a cousin of Jesus. So he had the brother, James the Lesser, and cousin, James the Greater. Really love that name. Just saying. So then my favorite one, and reading this story blew my mind and brought me on this amazing rabbit hole. And I'm just going to get into this one. So in 1226, there were these 3 German Templar knights that went up this mountain near Salzburg, Germany. I think it's called the Untersberg. It's this huge mountain straddling the border between Austria and Germany, right near Salzburg. These 3 German Templar knights take the trip up this mountain, and they have this miraculous appearance of the divine feminine, and a lot of amazing things are said. So because it's such a detail-rich story, I'm just going to share what I wrote because I don't want to miss a single detail, and this is very, very good. And I heavily encourage the listener to pay close attention to this one and listen to every word. The Untersberg is a great mountain straddling the Austro-German border opposite Salzburg, Germany. It was reputed in local legend to be the seat of the god Wotan, or Odin, and to be haunted. The Knights Templar of the region had their headquarters in Vienna, and before the year 1222 never had a comtere, or a command post, near the mountain. The commander of a section returning from the Crusades to Austria in 1220 received an apparition believed to be of the demigoddess Isis at Nineveh, Old Babylon, who instructed him to proceed to the Untersberg mountain and erect a temple in her honor inside it. There she would address them frequently, which she did as from 1226. A written record was kept in the Isis Revelation. A complete religious treatise was compounded and delivered to Vienna in 1238. Acting upon her instructions in 1235 at Carthage, 2 German Templars received an apparition of the goddess Ishtar, who gave further instructions for the order to follow. The revelations of the deities Isis and Ishtar were translated into modern German in 1862, and the copies were kept. The appearance of Isis to the German knights sometime in the year 1220, the German Knight Templar and commander Hubertus Koch, returning to Austria from the Crusades with a small company, arrived at the ruins of the former Assyrian capital Nineveh in ancient Babylon. Here he reports being approached by an apparition of the demigoddess Isis, a graceful maiden-like figure of a girl whose copper-colored hair waved as if in a breeze, although the day was actually windless. She gave Koch instructions to proceed to the mountain of the old god Wotan, that is, the Untersberg near Salzburg, built a house there, and await her next apparition where she would give important information regarding a new golden age for the world. 1226. Remember the date. The first testified apparition of Isis at Untersberg occurred in the year 1226 and was repeated regularly over the next 12 years. Isis delivering the full 134 verses of her revelation by 1238. So over 12 years she appeared to these 3 German Templars at this temple, by the way, that they built to her. The supposed purpose of Isis was to help achieve the destruction of the powers of darkness in the heavens and on earth, and as a first step, the world had to be rid of the Church of Rome since it worshipped Jehovah as God Almighty. Remember, I brought up the Gnostics. I did that for a reason, because the Templars are very heavily Gnostic, as well as the Rosicrucians. That's pretty much all. Let me just say this. All these esoteric orders observe, wisdom and elements of the canon Gospels, but they also inherently understand the Gnostic version to be true. And it's very Gnostic. It's very Gnostic. So if you ever hear of a Christian mystic, they're probably pulling from Gnosticism, whether they've heard it or not, right? Gnostic it's the Greek word gnosis, which means like divine knowledge or wisdom. Not wisdom technically, but like illuminating knowledge. Like when you achieve this Gnostic truth, it's like your soul becomes a light. It flashes on and you're illumined. You have the knowing, right? Knowledge. That's what Gnostic means, or gnosis. Templars were Gnostic. Still are. Believe me. The underlying basis of the Isaias revelation is the Marcionite heresy of the 2nd century AD. Remember earlier I talked about the Marcionite movement. If you guys don't remember, run it back. I did. I brought it up. It denies that the Hebrew God of the Old Testament, always referred to in the Revelation as El Shaddai, which means Lord, was God of the New Testament. Isaiah states that it was Allvater, God himself, who descended in human form as the All-Christ, Jesus Christ, and was crucified by those he had come to reform. Keep in mind, these are Gnostic, Knights Templar Germans in the Middle Ages on the border of Austria and Germany. Their language is going to be very different than some monk at a monastery and, writing in English or Latin or something like that. They're going to be speaking German. They're going to have elements of Norse paganism from way back in the olden days in their thinking and belief system. So it's curious that these Gnostic Christian Templars are on this mountain of Wotan, which is Odin, by the way. And then the lady appears as Isaias and Ishtar, completely different traditions from Babylon, I believe, Ishtar. And they're being given terms like the Allvater, which is Odin, and the All-Christ. The what? I never heard of that one. I thought that was pretty cool. Viking Jesus. But the point is symbolism. The point is, the divine comes to you and speaks through your mind like a prism. So the divine is not changing. It is permanent. It is infinite. It is eternal. It's boundless. It's limitless. It can't be changed, right? But us dumb little humans, we change our language every few thousand years. That's like nothing in the cosmic scheme. And there's how many languages on Earth? Hundreds, if not thousands, right? So these omnipotent divine beings up there, they're scratching their head. They're like, all right, this guy's German. He's Christian, but he's a Templar, so he's into esotericism. So he understands archetypes and symbology. So we're going to talk about Jesus, but then we're going to wrap it in a package that they'll understand through their mind like a prism so that they'll receive the message and be able to transmit it forward. So people just have to understand the way that the divine communicates is through symbolism, right? And language. They appeal to your language. They come to you in the form that you understand, right? So they said it was the Allvater, God himself, who descended in human form as the All-Christ, Jesus Christ, and was crucified by those who he had come to reform. The goddess Ishtar is the intermediary for the Allvater, and Isaias is her secret aid, although Ishtar also hears all. Allvater speaks through carved runes, because Vikings, Franks at the time, which was like ancient Germany, they had Norse tradition, which was runes. That was their magical language, right? Ishtar and Isaias were both appointed in this way. Isaias states that she came from the celestial realms as a daughter of Cuthgracht, this being the realm of the daemons, not demons. Don't come at me. I'm not saying demon. I'm saying daemon. It's a Greek word. These entities are not demons in the sense of the English word, but are independent of the gods. They're like higher spiritual entities, right? And the most active enemies of the regions of darkness. Isaias had also been a daemon, as written by Plutarch in the Mysteries of Isis, and achieve the rank of goddess by her virtue. The irrevocable promise of eternal life is made to those who attain the kingdom of heaven. Mankind, tied to the earth and mortal, is ultimately immortal. The earthly death is the beginning. At death, people, good and bad, come to Grunland, or purgatory, so called for its greenish light, over which Isaias rules. Purgatory encloses all of the worlds. The stay in purgatory may last merely a few days or countless years. Once liberated, each being chooses a route he or she wishes to follow as the path to the heavenly realm. From purgatory, Isaias keeps watch on the earth and reads all thoughts occurring there. Every human being alive on this planet today, you have to understand your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your intentions, they are constantly being monitored by the spirit world. And that is why you absolutely must be a good person, and you must do the right thing and have the right intention, because nobody gets away from what's due to them. You know, it's karma. The universe is constantly aware of every bit of your consciousness. There is no hiding that. There's absolutely no hiding anything from the spirit world. That is why the Egyptians say, at death, your heart is put on a scale and is weighed against a feather. And if it's not lighter than a feather, sorry, you got to keep coming back. You got to keep coming back until your heart and your conscience is as light as a feather. At the center of purgatory is the glorious fortress realm of Valhalla, where dwell the warrior gods with their wives, the latter presumably being the Valkyries of Nordic legend. Both Ishtar and Isaias have right of hospitality there. We are told that by Isaias that Woden rests at the foot of Untersberg mountain, hidden deep in the rock, until the hour when he will awaken to act in word and deed, but no further explanation is given. Also within purgatory is Fuel, hell so-called, a creation of the fallen angel Shaddai, who wages incessant war in his effort to enable himself and his devotees to take over heaven and the earth itself. At the final end, the earth and the starry firmament will disappear, leaving only the kingdoms of heaven and hell. And in whichever of these one finds himself at that time, he must remain there for all eternity. Thus ends the Isaiah revelation. So you have to understand, all of this was communicated in language and symbolism to these Templars in Germany in medieval times, so that they would understand the meaning, right? There's a lot of similarities between this and other myths, but let's keep going. Let's just keep going. Let me find where I was at real quick, because it's not over. And actually, did I lose my spot here? The irrevocable promise of eternal life. Oh, here we are. Sorry, got sidetracked there. The time of Ishtar and Isaias will come when the earth and the hearts of all its peoples shall enter the golden age, perhaps in 1,000 years. Weird. 1226. Lady comes down to these Templars on top of a mountain and says, perhaps in 1,000 years I will return, when the hearts of all of his people shall enter the golden age. I wonder, that's weird, because 1226 and 2026, that's exactly 800 years. Perhaps is a way to say something like that. You know what I mean? The time of Ishtar, or Isaias, will come when the earth and all of his people shall enter the golden age, in perhaps 1,000 years. At the center of purgatory is the glorious fortress realm of Valhalla. Oh, I skipped the 1,000-year part. Okay, that's it. On to the next one. Marcion, 84 to 160 AD, very important figure. He was the son of a bishop and a ship owner. Around 135 AD in Rome, he developed these completely new theological beliefs about Jesus. His cult claimed, most importantly, that the Hebrew God Jehovah was neither the true God nor the Father of Jesus Christ. Okay, so the popularity of the heresy forced the early church to decide that the Old Testament should be made canon. So Marcion was sort of like a prominent Gnostic figure, and his whole movement was literally like trying to have people separate the New Testament and the Old Testament, like completely, just have nothing to do with each other. So the idea in Gnostic thought and the Marcionite movement is that Jesus came, and when he came into the world, he had a completely new God that had never been heard of or seen before, at least to the masses, at least to mainstream thought and religion. Naturally, we know if you trace the thread, if you start talking to Rosicrucians or Templars or Masons even, if they're very high level, or, people in other traditions like Golden Dawn, Theosophy, or even Edgar Cayce, that alone is kind of like a mystery tradition, his whole body of work. If you start talking to these kinds of people, they'll tell you that Jesus, according to some evidence, he was a part of many of these mystery traditions. And there's an idea there that there may have been 18 years of his life missing from the Bible, because actually in the Bible, he's born, he's whisked to Egypt because the king at the time had a message from these Zoroastrian magi that the Christ was born. So then the king said, I got to kill all babies from 0 to 2 just to slaughter this king so he won't challenge my throne someday. Those Zoroastrian magi, the 3 kings, they go to Jesus, they adorn him with gifts, and then they tell his parents, hey, y'all got to get out of Dodge because King Herod is going to kill him. They took him to Egypt, and Jesus grew up in Egypt. So from the time he's born to a little child, you see a story of him when he's 12, and it's just this little anecdote about he has a crowd of people and he's ministering. His parents lost him and they're scared, and they start looking everywhere for him, and then they find him and they see he has a crowd of people and he's like teaching them things, and they were all stunned by it and blown away. Then the story passes over the rest of his life until he's 30. So literally in the Bible, it's born, 12, 30. So it's like, what happened in those other 18 years? Don't people wonder about that? Well, the suggestion is that he was, going to different mystery schools, different traditions, India, Persia, Greece, China, Tibet, Nepal, etc., and learning all of these different traditions, becoming a master of all these different orders. Everywhere he went, they're like, dang, he's legit. He's somebody special. And he sort of accumulated this vast esoteric knowledge. And then he comes back around the time he's 30, and boom, he starts his mission. He starts waking people up. He starts revealing a lot of hidden knowledge that had never before been seen or heard by the mainstream population of Earth at the time. Starts amassing crowds of followers, and people were very threatened by that, so they killed him. So there's an argument that this God above God, has been observed across these different traditions in secret, throughout time, throughout the ages, and that this knowledge survived from Atlantis. But the notion is that Jesus brought it to the world, and he brought it public, and then these movements start popping up. The Gnostics start popping up. Then you start seeing stuff like in 545 AD, they held the second Council of Constantinople, and they banned Origenism, which is transubstantiation of the soul, or reincarnation, right? The idea that we reincarnate through many lives. So Emperor Justinian actually historically banned the doctrine of reincarnation being taught in early Christian churches. And even by the Pope at the time was teaching it. Just saying. There's different threads that you can follow throughout history to see that it's a complicated thing, right? This whole story of Jesus. My main point to all this is the laity as it connects to Christianity and other traditions. But it's just fascinating stuff that we haven't talked about in a while, right? So the whole Marcionite movement was basically bringing a lot of this stuff into the foreground of the masses at the time, right, in first century Judea. And then they became a heretical threat, and they were killed. They were put to death. All of this eventually got so strong that it led to the Templar Knights being slaughtered, because they were Marcionite Gnostic Christians. They were very much actively engaged in the cult of the Magdalene. My main point, to make a bigger point, the lady's important, right? But it's very important, actually. But the bigger point there is the connection to Christianity, that you can't separate the two. That's my whole point, right? You can't separate the goddess and Christianity. They are very intimately linked. I grew up as a fundamental, like, straw in the mouth, sitting on a rocking chair. How about that buck you shot, Bo? Bible Belt Christian, never hearing of any of this. I was very shocked when I found out that there was a divine feminine. My main point, to wrap it back to the beginning, the deeper you go and really start to peel these layers, you see that the divine feminine was always there. Part of Christianity, part of the religion, part of Christ, part of the whole, part of all of it, part of every tradition around the world. Every. And for some weird reason, 2,000 years ago, it was brutally suppressed. And people who were talking about it were literally slaughtered by the church. First it was, the empire, and then eventually that got dissolved, and then it became, and then for a while you had the emperor and the pope, and that went away, and now we have the pope, right? You know the deal. Throughout that empire rising and falling, Christianity was brutally slaughtered and oppressed. And then when they made Christianity legal, they brutally slaughtered and suppressed the ones that were talking about this version. The version that is, more mystical, more likely to be true. It concerns the lady and many other explosively different doctrines like reincarnation, right? The sense that the soul is immortal beyond death, not just one life and then you go to hell, but actually, maybe you're already in it. And the whole point of living like Christ is get out of it, to go back home, to return to the heavenly realm. They went from killing all Christians to killing those Christians, killing the ones talking about that. And then they took this like mainstream version and they put together only certain texts as a counter to this Gnostic Cathar, which we didn't even talk about that, future episode. Gnostic Cathar, Templar Knight, mystical Marian sort of cult of the Magdalene Christian who revered the feminine as a sacred part of the divine. And Mary Magdalene was actually seen as like one of Jesus's right hands and, his favorite disciple and like this high priestess. They were killed. As a counter to that movement, they added the Old Testament specifically to be doctrine as a part of the New Testament. But the idea was Jesus was coming around saying, no, this is a whole new thing. It's a whole new system, whole new God. There's many points in the Bible where he points to that and he talks about how the old law is abolished and it's a whole new thing. Like even in the canon version, there's elements of that where you could see, okay, there's probably something more to this, right? So, there was an appearance of the lady in 1235. Yeah, in Carthage. Okay. So more Templar Knights. Go figure. The lady loves appearing to them. So obviously Carthage was a big hub of Christianity in the early formation of the movement. The first archdiocese of the church being established in the partially rebuilt city in the 2nd century, which means from 100 to 200, right? In the year 1235 AD, acting on information received no doubt from Isaias, the German Templar Knights Roderick and Emerant disembarked at Carthage in search of the missing writings of the heretical Marcion, the founder of this Marcionite, Gnostic, Christian, Old Testament, New Testament gods are separate movement. A hill named Bursa runs down to the sea, and within this hill was a grotto of the temple formerly dedicated to the city's queen goddess Tanit. In this grotto, the two Templar Knights received an apparition of the goddess Ishtar. In his account, the German knight Roderick reported the apparition was a figure clothed in a breath-fine dress of shimmering green, such that one could perceive the outline of a tall female, slim and supple, shining through it. She was a wonderful being, half woman and half girl, and undoubtedly not of this world. Her beautiful face was narrow and pallid and absolutely wonderful. Her eyes, hair, and fingernails shone with the color of amber. A golden tiara held back the masses of her hair, which reached to the ground, and on top of the tiara was a golden crescent moon with points like horns. Ding, 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 ding. Sound familiar? That's how she appeared to my dad. She had the horn. She said basically her name was Hathor. She had the depiction. She had a throne, actually. with that symbol, with the horns and the solar disc, right? She didn't physically have it on her head when she appeared, but he saw her a second time, and she had that imagery on a throne that she was in the desert, right? Her unhumanly large eyes stared at us, and her lips seemed to be glowing. And she was the most beautiful picture that a person ever saw, but she was translucent and not of humankind. She said, "I called you here without you being aware of it," at which Roderick asked for her identity. She answered at once, "I am Isai, Ishtar. The folk who revered me in this place called me Asherah. The people in the north who were your ancestors knew me as Idun, which is a Nordic Aesir goddess. Different people named me as suited their own language. Then the German knight Emerant said that they were both true to the Lord Jesus Christ and would never worship another deity. Ishtar, apparently amused, replied, "I heard your prayers to him, to my godlike brother, but he is in his realm, while I, his godlike sister, am here again for a short while. For ultimately it is female power which will defeat Jehovah, Satan. The goddess of love will change into a goddess of war to strike down Satan when the moment comes." If you know the myth of Sekhmet and Hathor, right? This is the real Egyptian myth. Ra, the god, the god above gods, Amun-Ra. At different points in Egyptian history, over time it became syncretized, and they would take two different gods and they would fuse them, and their names would be merged, and it would be a new understanding of God, right? Because over thousands of years, they're like, well, actually, God's invisible too. It's visible like the sun, but it's invisible. Oh, wow, Amun is invisible, Ra is visible, and they merge it. It's Amun-Ra. At some point in time, it used to be Amun and Ra, and they were separate gods. Do you see what I'm saying? It's syncretization. Over time, their understanding changes. But I forgot what. Oh, Amun-Ra, the myth of Ra. At the time, it was just Ra in this particular myth. But Ra creates the world through his eye, which shines like the sun. Sekhmet is born, and she's this cat-headed deity, and she's like this vicious, fierce, destructive force who is drunk off of the blood of mankind that she's devouring like wine, as the myth goes. That Ra sends her to the earth to destroy because mankind is being vile and hateful, kind of like the flood, kind of like the Noah story where mankind's lost its way. So Sekhmet comes down, and she's getting drunk off of the blood and carnage of her destroying man through her wrath and her fury. The blood is like wine to her. It's intoxicating. And then Ra weeps at their suffering. And I don't know the exact technical details. You can look it up. But then through Ra weeping and feeling sympathy for man, and it's kind of like Noah's Ark, the rainbow, right? Ra changes her into Hathor, the loving, nurturing mother, whose symbol is the cow, which is like the udder that nourishes the cosmos through her love and her comfort. She's the mother now. She's feminine. She's beauty. She's fertility. She's, love, grace. So she went from being wrath to love. So, and there's multiple versions of this, and this mythological iconography understanding of the divine feminine, how it's wrath, fierce judgment, and it's comfort and love. It is both. That is exactly what I saw on DMT. I saw the feminine, the divine feminine, and I was terrified. And it was like my whole entire perception was this huge energy being, and it was a face with all these abstract wavy lines, and it was magenta, and it was like really scary to behold. And at times it would change red and it would seem really aggressive, but I understood that it was fierce, it was loving, it was nurturing, but it was powerful, that it could smite me, but also that it comforted me. It was weird. It was like this paradox of things that I was feeling on DMT before I knew any of that, But anyway, so the goddess of love will change into a goddess of war to strike down Satan when the moment comes, right? Going back to the reading. She continued, "You will not find far from this place an ancient stone which bears the sign of my divinity and the symbol of the hand in greeting. Beneath this stone you will discover that which you came here to find, and you will find that the legacy of my divine brothers differs greatly from what you have been given to understand in many things." Divine brother, remember, that's Jesus. Nearby, outside the old city boundaries, was a cemetery known as the Sanctuary of Tanit, an enclosure for placing short and upright stone stelae for funeral purposes. The goddess Ishtar stated next, "I had been appointed the deity for Babylon by the Godhead. The Babylonians were an excellent people, but the settlement of a huge Hebrew minority in their midst ruined the plan to make Babylon the world capital. Ishtar explained that a people closest in character to the Babylonians, the Germanen, including all of the Franks of German descent, had been chosen to build a new capital over a secret temple in which all of your knowledge is to be deposited. Thus, Berlin Tempelhof was founded in 1237, and the new Templar realm was to extend south from Berlin to Vienna and as far as west as Paris. The church got wind of this planning, preempted the great work, and on 13th of October 1307 put down the Templar order with great brutality. They were cursed by the church. They were hunted down. They were burned at the stake. They were tortured. They were slaughtered. And that's actually why we have Friday the 13th. And it's considered an unlucky day because it was Friday the 13th that the Templars were killed. Fun fact. Any thoughts on any of that? Did you know any of that?
No, this is all new to me.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it.
It was new to me too. Granted, the point of this is not necessarily to say all of this little doctrine is 100% true. The point of this is to talk about different apparitions of the feminine throughout time. I think that, and I'll get into some of this, as she appeared to different cultures, she had slightly different messages, right? So just an update on that. 700 years since the revelation of Isaiah of 1238 in November 1937, a crowned apparition proclaiming herself queen of the poor souls in purgatory was spotted, making the first of 105 apparitions over a 3-year period at the small German North Sea village of Heide and Ems. This apparition must have been Isaiah. The church has done its utmost not to draw attention to these visitations. On February 11th, 1951, in Dusseldorf, Germany, the apparition of the Virgin Mary appalled the church by stating that she wished to be known henceforth as Our Lady of all peoples, who once was Mary, and that she had come as co-redeemer, advocate, and mediatrix. In her 44th apparition of the Amsterdam series in the early 1950s, she stated, Our Lady of all peoples promises to aid mankind if this title is acknowledged, and I am invoked under this title. The lady. Boom. She's the lady. She's the lady of all people. It's the goddess. It's the secret link to human history, to our understanding of why civilizations have risen and fallen. People say, oh, that's a stretch. No, it's not, because all of these civilizations that rose and fall, they all had religions. They all had priests, and it was an intimate part of their entire society. We know Rome, probably before now, the messed up empire we're in, which is this global empire run by an oligarch, a secret oligarch, right? Duh, if you didn't know that, by the way. Rome was probably the greatest empire that we know of. The elite of Rome were participating in Mithraic rituals, cults of Isis, cults of Ishtar, you name it. They were participating. The elite, fathom that. Think about that. The elite at different points in all of history, in every civilization, in some way was affiliated with religious mystery or ceremony or sacrament. It's a very important part of human history. And people say, oh, well, it's a new world and, science and, push their glasses up and put on their white lab coat and role play as being a scientist because they watched, Neil deGrasse Tyson on Joe Rogan or, Eric Weinstein talk about math numbers like a nerd. No offense, but like a nerd, base their facts on reality, on numbers and what nerds are doing in a lab. And I love nerds. I'm a nerd. Hey, my case is Dragon Ball. That's about as niche as it gets, anime and being into nerdy stuff. But it's a bunch of nerds pushing a scientific dogma that they have destroyed our understanding of religion. And it's coordinated, I'm talking in modern times. Back then it was the church or it was I don't know, the Roman Empire or whoever oppressing people that were talking about these mysteries, the lady, the true story of Jesus, the real way in which these divine, miraculous things would interact with the world. They were killing those people. They were slaughtering them, peeling their flesh off, cutting their heads off, crucifying them, turning them upside down. Now they write hate comments on your YouTube for talking about this stuff. Or, stuff like that. Leave nasty comments in your Instagram inbox. It's about all they can do anymore. To me, at least. That's my experience. But the point is, religion, this missing current of history, this knowledge is so important for people to understand, so that they truly have their finger on the pulse of why empires rose and fell. This was an important part of their fabric, understanding this knowledge, understanding how the elites interacted with it and suppressed it, and still are today. But now it's through science. That was my point. Now they suppress it through, you got to study the facts. There's a peer-reviewed paper that says there is no God and there is no this, and UFOs probably exist, but, that Atlas thing coming in a few months is a hostile alien threat. And they believe all this bullcrap without any data because of science somehow. I don't know. I'm just saying. This stuff's important. It's very important. I think that about wraps up that story. The Lady of All Peoples. Oh, one more thing. In her apparition to nuns, she spoke through a wooden statuette dedicated to herself as Our Lady of All Peoples at a convent near Akita, Japan, October 13th, 1977. October 13th, 1973. 666 years to the day since the destruction of the Knights Templar Order. Referring to the apocalypse, she promised, "I alone am able to save you from the calamity which approaches. Those who place their confidence in me will be saved." I didn't realize this would... I'm about a quarter through my notes here. I'm going to be candid here, people. This is the first time we've recorded a topic without Nick. And I kind of didn't know I'd go this long before, and long. So I think maybe I could save a lot more of this information for another part. But there's a few that I have to hit. So are you good with that? Do you have any thoughts on that? You can speak.
No, I have no thoughts. I'm good. Go.
I looked at the clock. I said, "Oh my God, it's I'm rambling here, people." So we can't talk about the lady without talking about the Lady of Guadalupe, right? That's one of the most famous Marian apparitions in all of human history. It is a largely pilgrimed sacred site of the Holy Mother. To this day, millions of people are in and out of there. And then we have Lourdes, France, too, which is probably Lourdes, Fatima, and the Lady of Guadalupe. Those are the three most famous. They're the only ones I'd ever heard of, other than my dad, of course, in Grays Creek, North Carolina. On December 9th, 1531, in Mexico, Our Lady appeared to Juan Diego, a poor, humble Aztec. Very cool, by the way. A poor, humble Aztec who had recently converted to the Catholic faith. She asked him to go to the bishop and tell him to build a church where she said, "I will show and offer all of my love, my compassion, my help, and my protection to my people." Juan Diego did as she asked, but the bishop asked for a sign that this message was really from Our Lady. Mary granted his request. On December 12th, she showed Juan where the most beautiful Castilian roses were and told him to gather them. It was a miracle that the roses were there and in bloom because there was frost on the ground, and the ground was an infertile place where only cactus and thistles grew. After he gathered them, she helped arrange them in his tilma or poncho and told him to show them to the bishop. When he brought them to the bishop was amazed at the roses, but was even more amazed at what began to happen to Juan Diego's tilma. Right before their very eyes, the image of Our Lady began to form on the cloth. The picture of Mary was beautiful. The bishop fell to his knees. He built a church right there on that spot at her request. It's still intact after 470 years. The colors haven't faded. The cloth hasn't deteriorated. It's been on display in the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe ever since. The manner in which the lady appeared was very significant to the Aztec Indians. God had her dressed in such a way that would stand out to them. Aztecs, they were not Christian, but they would understand the symbolism of her garb, of her dress, She was dressed in royal Aztec clothes that showed she was important, maybe a queen. She also had the symbol of the cross at her neck, which was the same symbol that the Spaniards had on their ships and in the churches that they built. Because remember, this was the 1500s. This was like, they were conquering this land and converting these people. She had a sash tied around her waist, which meant that she was with child, for this was the way the Aztec woman dressed when they were pregnant. And on her beautiful dress were all sorts of designs and flowers, but there was one flower on her dress that was very significant. It had 4 petals. To the Aztecs, this 4-petal flower was the symbol for the true God, or the God above gods. The flower was located on her abdomen, right over the place where Jesus was growing inside of her. The Aztecs immediately understood that this was the mother of the true God. This appearance of Our Lady of Guadalupe was obviously extremely important for Mexico, because at the time they were on the brink of a huge conflict. There was a war brewing between them. Their cultures were obviously extremely different, and the Aztecs had more of like a pagan approach, which I think elements of paganism are good in many circumstances. I think that word is very misunderstood and it's misconstrued. And it's taken out of context, right? But they worshipped many gods, and something that was very common in Aztec culture was they would perform ritual human sacrifice very regularly. Great movie to watch on that is Apocalypto by Mel Gibson. It is a fantastic movie. If you have not seen it, highly recommend it. There's a gnarly scene where there's this solar eclipse, and they're at these temples just ripping hearts out under the eclipse, and like it's graphic, but it's just so cool to see it portrayed. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, this was real. Like, they really did this. It's kind of shocking. You know what I mean? I love stuff like that. Just it's ominous almost. Like to know that people did that and it was common practice. And sometimes they would sacrifice like 10,000 people a day on certain times of the year. You know what I mean? If there was especially eclipses, they'd have lines of people, and these people would just take turns walking up. They get to this like a roller coaster. They get to the top of the temple, slit that chest open, rip that heart out, and it's beating. And then the blood would drip down the temple, and they would all celebrate. And there would be 10,000 people in a line going up there to get their heart ripped out. And obviously that's wrong. So because of the Lady of Guadalupe, the Aztec people converted to a new way where they stopped ripping out hearts, and they're Christian. So it's like kind of a miracle. Put them on a better path, dude. That's great. We should be happy about that. I'm thrilled. Are you not thrilled about that? That's pretty awesome. I'm smiling about it. They stopped ripping hearts out, dude.
Yeah, we do not condone human sacrifice.
It's terrible, man. No, we don't. We still don't. I stand on that to this day. We've been saying that for years. We do not condone human sacrifice on Bledsoe Said So. It's terrible. So St. Catherine and the Miraculous Medal. Actually, I had never heard of this one. It's very interesting, and now I kind of want a medal, right? So I'm not going to go into the intimate details of this one, but basically in 1830, there was a saint. I don't know if at the time she was a saint, but her name was Catherine. I don't know how to say this. Catherine Labour. I don't know. I don't speak French. Your wife's like a quarter Belgian. Can you pronounce that?
Help me out with the what do I look up? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Tilma of Juan Diego right now. Pictures.
Oh, you're behind, bro.
I'm just soaking in the pictures, man.
You're behind. St. Catherine Labour. I don't know, man. I don't know French. But I'm trying here. Basically,
that's exactly what I would say. I can't help you out on that one.
Well, we can be wrong together. So there's this place called the Rue de Bac. It's like a chapel of the Mother house or something. And basically, one night she was in silent meditation. She sees the chapel and it's fully lit. There's candles in there. All of the offerings are being burnt and all that stuff. And she thinks there's like a service or something going on. So she goes into the church. And I'm just going to read the way it's described because it's very specific and symbolic. So obviously the chapel was ablaze with lights. She walks in. She approaches the sanctuary that's filled with radiance as if consumed with fire, kneels at the communion rail. She feels the presence of another person near. When she lifts her head from prayer, the Blessed Virgin, in a blaze of glory, sits in a chair just beyond her reach. When Catherine rises, she goes over and she kneels at the lap of the Blessed Virgin, and she rests her hands in her lap. So there's this Holy Mother apparition right in front of her sitting in the chair in the throne, right? And then or not throne, but it's like just a chair in the church. So Catherine gets up, walks over, kneels in front of her, and puts her hands in her laps and kneels. Mary places her arms around Catherine, and she says, God wishes to charge you with a mission. You're going to be contradicted, but do not fear. You're going to have grace. Tell your spiritual director all of the passes within you, everything that comes to you. Go and tell your person who's in charge, basically, like your bishop or whatever. I don't know Catholic stuff that well, but she basically says, go tell your director everything that transpires. Times are evil in France and in the world. A pained expression comes across her face. The Marian apparition, she starts to look sad, like she's feeling suffering and sorrow for humanity. She says, come to the foot of the altar. Graces will be shed on all, great and little, especially upon those who seek them. Another community will become large. You will have the protection of God and St. Vincent. I will always have my eyes upon you. In 1849, Elizabeth Ann Selton Sisters of Emmitsburg, Maryland, joined the Daughters of Charity in Paris. Mother Seton's sisters became the foundation stone of the Sisters of Charity in the United States. The Blessed Virgin spoke to Catherine about many other things which were to happen according to her mission, the things that she had to get going, like starting these different movements in churches. Then, like a fading shadow, the lady was gone. The angel, after having led Catherine back to the dormitory, also disappeared just as the clock strikes 2 a.m. She had another apparition. So she goes back a few months later, like 4 months later, she returns to her in the same chapel. And these are actually her own words. Catherine Labour, she writes this. On the 27th of November, 1830, while making my meditation in profound silence, I seemed to hear on the right-hand side of the sanctuary something like the rustling of a silk dress. Glancing in that direction, I perceived the Blessed Virgin standing near St. Joseph's picture. Her height was medium and her countenance indescribably beautiful. She was dressed in a robe the color of the dawn, high-necked with plain sleeves. Her head was covered with a white veil, which floated over her shoulders down to her feet. Her feet rested upon a glove. Or rather a globe. I had a typo. A globe, or rather one half of a globe, for that was all that could be seen. Her hands, which were on a level with her waist, held in an easy manner another globe, a figure of the world. Her eyes were raised to the heavens, and her countenance beamed with light as she offered the globe to our Lord. As I was busy contemplating her, the Blessed Virgin fixed her eyes upon me, and a voice said in the depth of my heart, this globe which you see represents the whole world, especially France and each person in particular. There now formed around the Blessed Virgin a frame rather oval in shape on which were written in letters of gold these words. O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee. Then a voice said to me, have a medal struck upon this model. All those who wear it, when it is blessed, will receive great graces, especially if they wear it around the neck. Those who repeat this prayer with devotion will be in a special manner under the protection of the Mother of God. Graces will be abundantly bestowed upon those who have confidence. At the same instant, the oval frame seemed to turn around, and I saw on the back of it the letter M surmounted by a cross with a crossbar beneath it, and under the monogram of the name of Mary, the holy hearts of Jesus and his mother, the first surrounded by a crown of thorns, and the second transpierced by a sword. I was anxious to know what these words must be placed on the reverse side of the medal, and after many prayers, one day in meditation, I seemed to hear a voice which said to me, the M with the cross and 2 hearts tell enough. Now, actually, this medal went on, this was all reported all the way up through the institution of the church, and it was never sanctioned by the church as a genuine Marian apparition, but was confirmed to be real through the fact that the actual medal that she describes and everything started to go into official use in iconography shortly after all this started happening. It was sometime in the late 1800s they started actually adopting the symbol of this medal in the Catholic Church. Interesting. Never heard of that one. So I've got a few more, and I don't have to go into extreme detail about Lourdes because I feel like that one is very famous. Basically, in Lourdes, France, let me get the year on that one really quick. Lourdes, France, in 1858, the Virgin Mary appears 18 times to Saint Bernadette I don't know how to say this, Subiro, 14-year-old peasant girl in a grotto in Massabielle, France, in the town of Lourdes. This is known as Our Lady of Lourdes. This led Bernadette to discover a spring with healing properties and deliver a message of prayer, penance, and conversion. Obviously, this one is sanctioned by the church as a genuine miracle. To this day, millions of people from around the world travel to the site to drink from the spring and to touch the water, to just be around the water, you know. And then obviously we have Fatima, which is probably the most famous of all time Marian apparitions, which happened, I believe, in like 1912. Let me look it up. Or it might be 1917 seems to stick out. Fatima. I don't remember the exact year, but I know it was before World War II.
1917.
1917, yeah. Basically, it's known as the Miracle of the Sun. There's these 3 little kids in 1917 in Fatima, Portugal. These 3 little kids wander away, and they're kind of out by themselves, sort of like out on the outskirts of town, and they see the lady, basically. Obviously, they think of her as the Virgin Mary because they're Catholic. A lot of these, they think it's Mary because they're Catholic, and that's how they're made to understand. But it's not Mary. It's not the human Mary. Understand that God speaks to you through the prism of your mind and your understanding. So to a Catholic, it's Mary.
I saw something today that I thought was interesting here, but it's the same eyes that you use to see God are the eyes God uses to see you.
Yeah. Yeah, I just read that the other day too. And it's very fascinating to think. I was like, oh, wow, what does that mean? It's complicated. It's not literally Mary. It is the divine using iconography, symbolism, language to that person so that they understand the meaning and the message. That's what it is, you know. So it appears to a lot of people as Mary. It appeared to the German Templar Knights and said Ishtar. It appeared to my father and it said Hathor. But the key is, in many of these apparitions, the lady, I even read one tonight, and she said the same exact thing to my father 13 years ago. She says, but I have been known by many names throughout time. I'm nameless. That's what she said to my father. I'm nameless. I've been known by many names. I've been known as Hathor. Oh, cool. My Templar friend, very wise individual, he thinks that she gave that name in the first place just for us to have these pathways to study, to get to the bottom of this and make all these connections. If she had said Mary, it would have been like, oh, cool, you know, just another Christian saying they saw Mary. No, we weren't saying that.
Right, exactly. Or if your dad was a Catholic and she said, and she appeared to him even in the way she did, it would have been, oh, it's Mary. Signed, sealed.
And people would say,
done,
yeah,
Catholic
right.
Miracle.
Another Catholic saying they saw Mary. No,
Right.
It's bigger than that. This isn't Catholic. Catholic is one rather large, small part of this. But this does not belong to Catholics. The mother, the truth, it doesn't belong to Catholics. Or anybody. They all have a part to play in this. They all have a piece of this. They all have something of value to add to this. They don't own this. The truth is above all worldly systems, I believe. And I believe they are all different puzzle pieces. And that's why we go down all these rabbit holes of syncretism and esoteric and mythology and all this stuff, because you're seeing where all these puzzle pieces fit. And it's like we talked about in the beginning, the metaphor of the pool. You start leaving those shallow waters and you start treading in the deep end. And you start realizing, wow, I can swim. I can do this. This is great. It's fun, actually. You start swimming through these waters and you start seeing all these connections. And you realize you're floating. Okay, I'm free. I don't have to go to church every Sunday. I don't have to be a good Catholic. I don't have to do this. I can be free from those worldly systems. Begin to see with a new lens. And see that there's a greater story unfolding here. There's a universal cosmic story that is not bound by any of these systems. And all of these other systems are different points in human history where people on the planet are just trying to make sense of it. That's all it is. They don't have all the pieces. They don't have all the answers. Some of them have a lot more than others. Really inclined to think that the Templars and the Rosicrucians probably have the biggest pieces of the puzzle. And all of those that came before them, the Hermeticists, the alchemists, the Essenes, the Therapeutae, a lot of that stuff we talked about before. I think there's like 2 more apparitions. I'm just going to breeze through them and then we can round it out because I've been holding you guys hostage all night talking about this stuff. And I keep going. I can keep on going. I mean, the sky's the limit. It's a new world. So we have the metal. We have La Salette. I didn't mention that. I think this might be the last one I have. Basically, there's this beautiful lady that appears to 2 children in 1846. You know what? There actually is another one I forgot to mention. I'm going to save it for last. Champion, Wisconsin. My dad was just there like 2 weeks ago. He actually went there, and my sister. And they actually saw a miracle. They saw orbs over the sacred shrine of Champion, Wisconsin. And when my dad and the rest of the group turned away, my sister, Emily, and our friend and very close, basically extended member of the family, Emil, he's kind of like you. He's like a friend who's just become a part of this, and he helps us out with things and stuff. He's basically part of the family, is what I'm trying to say. Like you or whatever. We love Emil. He and Emily saw an apparition appear over the shrine in Champion, Wisconsin. And it wasn't like it was a human. It was an orb with like a really big, kind of like a golden white orb with a blue aura around it. And it appeared, and then it shot down into the ground at the shrine of the lady in Champion, Wisconsin. So that was wild. Forgot to mention earlier that with the metal situation, that story with Catherine Laborde and the metal, it was described that the Mother Mary figure had like this oval blue shape around her. Well, if you know about symbolism, that you can look into the Vesica Piscis, which is a sacred geometry symbol, which basically is that. It symbolizes that. It's like the sacred portal through which life enters the world, can be symbolized as I'm just gonna say it, and I would hate to make anybody blush, but it's symbolized by the female genitals because it's the portal which souls incarnate into the world, right? Anyway, interesting symbolism there. So 1846, we have, I kind of cut to the Champion thing. Now we're back to La Salette. So 1846, a beautiful lady appears to 2 children, both from basically the French Alps. And they're watching their herds on the slope of Mont Planot and not far from the village of La Salette. In a little hollow, they suddenly notice a globe of fire as though the sun had fallen on that spot. Within the dazzling light, they gradually perceived a woman seated, her elbows resting on her knees and her face buried in her hands. The beautiful lady rose and said to the children, "Come closer, my children. Don't be afraid. I'm here to tell you great news." She took a few steps toward them. Maxim and Melody, reassured, ran down to her and stood very close to her. The beautiful lady wept the whole time she spoke, which is what she did to my father too. The second time he saw her, she wept. She wept for the sadness of humanity and our suffering. She was tall. Everything about her radiated light. She had a typical garb of the women of the surrounding area at the time. Long dress and an apron around her waist with a shawl crossed over her breast and tied behind her back and a close-fitting bonnet. Again, appearing through the prism of your understanding. They appeal to what you know. Along the hem of her shawl, she wore a broad, flat chain, and from a smaller chain around her neck, there hung a large crucifix. Under the arms of the cross, there were to the left of the figure of Christ a hammer, and to the right, pincers. The radiance of the entire apparition seemed to emanate from this crucifix and shone like a brilliant crown upon the beautiful lady's head. She wore garlands of roses on her head, around the edge of her shawl, and around her feet. Worth mentioning, my mother saw an enormous orb, probably the size of like a full car, in the shape of a Templar cross several years ago. Anyway, I don't need to read word for word all of her messaging, but basically it was like People need to repent. They've been falling away from their devotion, and they've been blaspheming the Holy Spirit. Like at the time, there was like a lot of famine and plague and suffering going on in France, and war was about to break out soon. It actually did very shortly after this. And she basically said people need to return to Mass on the Sabbath. People now show up in droves to mock, and they've lost their connection. And get people to stop swearing the name of God and blaspheming. So it was like a, whoa, people are falling away from God. They have to return, or I will let go of the hand that is holding Jesus, and you will lose your grace, and you will suffer greatly if you don't return, kind of thing. It was like a message to come back to God. You guys have strayed. And I don't think I finished the Fatima story. Let me run that back real quick. I think I went on a whirlwind over there and didn't round that one out, but it's the most famous one, right? These two little kids, they see the lady. She says, hey, here's 3 secret messages. Gives them 3 secret messages. Well, 2 of them were later leaked to the world, and the theory, is to someday they'll leak the 3rd one. It's in the vault in the Vatican somewhere, and it really is. They really do have the 3rd message. It's sealed. But basically, she said, on this day, I will appear. Go tell everyone. Recorded history. 100,000 people show up in 1917, whatever the day is, I don't remember. And they call it the miracle of the sun. Now, the Vatican has a different version that we have been made privy to because of we are who we are, and we are a genuine modern day apparition, our family, and we kind of been made to understand that there's a connection here with all these things. The mainstream version says there was an illusion. The sun sort of like looks like there's 3 of them, and they call it the miracle of the sun. And the lady appeared. She floated in the sky, and she had a message, and 100,000 people saw it, and they cheered, whatever. The Vatican version actually goes into detail about how it's UFOs. The lady appears surrounded by UFOs. You know what I'm saying? So there's a connection here with the UFO and the lady. So let me summarize everything, right, and close this out. The goddess, the divine feminine, the lady, our mom, our spiritual mother. I think that it is the most important missing link for all of human history. And it has been heavily suppressed. There are many times in human history where she has appeared and basically said, whoa, whoa. Not only W-O-A-H, but W-O-E. Whoa. You guys are going to fall upon great calamity and suffering through oppression of a dark force if you don't turn to me and come to me. I'm here to help. I'm the comforter, right? The Holy Spirit. And that's basically exactly what she told my father. Like, don't believe me? Go listen to it. What's the episode number? Find it for me, for any new listener. Read the transcript. Exactly what she said. It's crazy, the similarities between the things that she told my father in 2012 and all of these different times in the past. It's like, I'm going down these rabbit holes. I'm like, oh my God. Something's happening here. This is crazy. Like, it's wild. So in 2012, when she first came, people from the CIA start door knocking. They start coming to our house. Really, that started happening in 2013. But she came in 2012, and then by 2013, they were coming to our physical property to talk to us, to ask us questions. And other people, it ramped up. Do you have the number?
Episode 185 is the latest one.
The second reading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 185. Go listen to 185. You'll hear the entire transcript of what she told my father. Anyway, they start coming to our house. They start asking us questions. We meet other people in the CIA. It still goes on to this day. I know many of them. They come to us. And what they were telling us in the beginning is this lady is revered. She's revered around the world, across every tradition. She's very sacred. We know she's real. We know she's a very powerful entity. We want to know what she's telling you. We want to know what she wants with you. This is a very big deal. This is the most heavily guarded secret of all time. And, she's been tracked for many thousands of years. So we're like scratching our head. We're like, whoa, Really? We grew up Protestant. We'd never heard of this. Huge existential shock, one might say. So I don't really know where to go from here. I mean, I think that's probably a good place to round it out, but I just want to encourage people to fathom the lady. And honestly, I laugh at the notion that people even entertain the BS mainstream version of UFOs. Like, it's ridiculous. It's purely ridiculous. And but then, when the laughing subsides and my true feelings come out, I feel sadness. I feel sadness for people being fooled and brainwashed, being manipulated into believing crap that is nonsense and is not true. And I just pray that people understand that, like, this divine feminine force is very real, is very much a part of every tradition around the world, including Christianity, especially Christianity. Not just in the Catholic way, though. That's the later version, when the mainstream was killing the good stuff. They were killing the real message with the real people. Then they came up with that version and they changed it. And they took the image of the divine and they confined it to a human. You see what I'm saying? It's bigger than Mary. It's not Mary. Mary is a part of it. Mary is an amalgam of it. Google that word. She's an amalgam of the divine feminine. This Catholic iconography, it is not the true meaning of it. It is much bigger than that. It is deeper, right? So, in truth, if you're having a discussion about actual real truth, you can't acknowledge the UFO without the lady. The UFO belongs to the lady. The lady's the most important, all of it. The most important part of all of it. And the UFOs answer to her call. And they are merely just, you could view it as angels in her army. Or beings in her host. She's like the queen of heaven. She is one of the very highest emanations of our created reality. Next above her would be the God above all gods, the one true secret God, the eternal light that is boundless, that can't be conceived of, that can't be described, cannot be fathomed. That's God. That's consciousness. That's every molecule of existence. That's every vibrating atom. That is every thought in your brain. When you die and you go to the other side, you see that flash of white light. That is God. It's infinite energy in every dimension. Can't even begin to describe it, right? The next emanation beneath that is the lady. She's also God, in a way, in the created worlds. She's the mediator between us and that highest reality. She is our intercessor. It's been said in Catholicism, or it was told to me by a Catholic recently, I'll just say that when you think of Mary, I say it in quotes because you think of the divine feminine, but that's how they understand her. You think of, okay, I want to pray to God, but I'm scared about my prayers getting there to the right destination. Can you get them there for me, Mary? That would make me feel nice and good. Okay, thank you. So you send your prayers to Mary, and she's the intercessor or the mediatrix or the redemptrix. So they pray through the Virgin Mary, and then the idea is that Mary takes her prayers to God, right? Or your prayers to God. Well, that's exactly true. The real divine feminine force, that's what she is. She's your intercessor between the highest God above all gods. So in a sense, she is God. It's a paradox. But then in a sense, Jesus is also God because he was a human that came here through his path. He fixed the cosmic error and allowed for this cosmic secret to be brought into our created world for the first time overtly to the masses through his life and his story and his message, which includes the lady, if you know where to look. If you know that they were killing the people that were talking about this stuff, right? Like the Templars and such, they preserve this message. Rosicrucians, you name it. Can't think about the UFO without the lady. I'm just saying. Any thoughts before we end it?
No, good job.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed listening.
Awesome. Well, I'm not going to lie. I was a little worried. The first one I'd be like, what do I talk about? And here we are at 2 hours, and I feel like I could.
Yeah, I don't think you had a lack of things to talk about there.
Wow.
Nice.
This is a big moment. All right, moment's over. Bye, guys.